Hey guys, and welcome back to another demonstration video. I know we had some questions or a request from Nick. I'm going off memory, so I hope this is correct. If not, let me know and I'll get up. I'll address some other specific things that you want to see. But I believe Nick said he wanted to see something like how do we create those ledger accounts and then take the ledger accounts and create the trial balance. So what I'm going to do here is just go through exercise 2-9, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those transactions and I'm not going to post them to a journal at all. I'm just going to post them straight to a ledger. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my ledger accounts and just kind of go from there. So just work with me here. So the first thing we have on August 1st, the owner contributed some cash, right? So remember, in the ledger, because that's what I'm working on here, in that ledger, I'm going to put my date, 4/1, right? And then I always have to have an explanation. So I want the explanation to go in B and C. I'm going to come here and click my Merge and Center button. And I'm going to make sure I always left the line. And I'm just going to type in explanation. I'm going to go to D1 and I'm going to make out my debit column. I'm just going to put a DR period. E2 is going to be my credit column. And I'm just going to say CR period. And F2, that's going to be my balance column. BAL period. And I'm good so far. Okay. Again, I like to make these things a little neater. So I'm going to go ahead and center, or I'm going to highlight cell reference D2, E2, and F2. And I'm going to click on my center. And I'm just going to put the debit and the credit and the balance right in the center of those columns. So, oh, that should be a date. So, first thing I have is on April 1st, right? So 4/1, I'm going to leave my explanation blank, but basically the owner contributed cash. So I'm going to debit cash for $5,000. And the other half of that entry has to be owner's capital, right? Well, I didn't create that ledger yet for owner's capital. I'll do that next. But what I want to do is just show you how we kind of use the debit column and the credit column to get that balance, okay? So right off the bat, I could just say $5,000 and be done with it, right? But I want to use the Excel functions, okay? And I basically want to mirror a cell. What in the world does that mean? Well, F3, right? F3, the cell reference that I'm in, I know my balance is $5,000 after this debit, right? But check this out. If I hit equals and I go to D3 and click on it, notice it says in F3, the original cell that I was in, says equals D3. Watch what happens. It equals D3. So if I change D3, let's just say it's $8,000. Watch what happens to F3. It changes. Pretty cool. So it just makes it nice and easy for us if we link up cells. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to come, I'm going to go underneath here. I'm going to skip a couple rows. It's just an arbitrary amount. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, come right here, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click cell reference A8 and I'm going to click and drag all the way over to F8. I'm going to merge and center this column and I'm going to call this my owner's capital. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did up above, right? I'm going to put in my date column. I'm going to put in my explanation. Now remember, I need B and C to be merged and centered. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight those two, click merge and center, and I'm going to type in explanation. Oh, it's centered. I don't like that, so I want to make sure it's left aligned, and there we go. And I'm going to type in my debit column, my credit column, and my balance column. Okay? And I'm going to center these. So on 4-1, this is the other part of the cash transaction. The owner contributed cash. Well, think about it. Owner's capital. How does owner's capital increase? Well, it increases with a credit. So I need to credit owner's capital. So I'm going to go to the owner's capital column, or owner's capital ledger, and I'm going to type in $5,000 to show that, hey, in the ledger, owner's capital, we have a credit there. So I'm going to go ahead and, after this transaction, balance this ledger, and I got $5,000. The next transaction it looks like we have is on looks like October 10th. Looks like we got $2,600 in, and apparently that was for some revenue that we had generated. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that that journal or post that transaction to the ledger. So I'm going to go ahead and say, well, on 4/10, I got cash. Cash is an asset. How do I increase an asset? With a debit. So I'm going to debit cash, $2,600. Now check this out. I need to put my balance in, right? I originally had $5,000. I added $2,600 to cash. So that should be $7,600 if my math's correct, right? But instead of just typing $7,600 in, check this out. We can use Excel and we could say, okay, I want to do a calculation. Equals, I want to add my balance, which is in cell reference F3. So I want to start there. And to that, I'm going to hit the plus button. I'm going to hit the plus button, sorry. And I'm going to go ahead over here and I'm going to click on cell D4, which is that second transaction that I made. So if you look in F4, you see F3 plus D4. So basically what we're doing here is we're taking whatever values in F3, and Excel is automatically going to add to whatever values in F3 the value that is in D4. We get 7,600. Okay. So we got some sales revenue here, right? So we need to make our sales revenue ledger. And I'm just going to come right here. And what I did was I just noticed that, okay, well, from A to F, that's my header of my ledger. So I just click those, and I'm going to click merge and center, and I'm going to call this revenue. Okay. Now, ideally, I would be I would be doing my journal entries first and then posting them to the ledger. We don't have to, well, we do that for a number of reasons. Number one is it lets us know if we make any mistakes. It shows us both sides of the transaction. But I'm just doing it in the ledger here. Again, I've been doing this forever. Trust me, eventually you stick with it, you study it long enough, you'll get to the point where you can do the same thing. So I'm just creating the ledger here. Debit column, credit column, and balance column. I apologize, my computer's going nuts. My mouse is just way too touchy here. Okay, so I want to center these just to make them look nice and neat. and I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, well, on 4/10, I had a sale, right? Now we're hitting revenue. We earned revenue, okay? In order to do that, we have to increase our revenue. In order to increase our revenue, we must credit it. So I'm going to credit it for $2,600. Okay? I now need to calculate my balance, right? So I'm just going to say equals. I want to equal whatever data is in E14. Okay? So the way we read this is on April 10th, we had a credit to revenue for $2,600. The balance after this transaction is $2,600. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our next one, and that looks like it would be August. Why am I typing in April when it's August? Just work with me here. We'll use April. It looks like April 12th, right, or August 12th, whatever. So it looks like on August 12th, it looks like we had a couple of transactions here, right? It looks like we bought some equipment for $500, and it looks like we paid some cash for it, and it looks like we put the rest on a note payable. So this is one of those compound transactions. I have a number of journal entries to do here. I have 3 journal entries in one transaction. So I bought equipment, I paid cash, and I paid notes payable, right? So I already identified the 3 accounts, right? I'm buying equipment, that goes up. That must be a debit. Cash is going down. Cash is an asset. I got to credit it. And then notes payable is a liability, right? The liability is going up, so I have to credit it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just create a ledger account for equipment. And I'm going to go to my Merge and Center, and I'm going to say, hey, this is equipment. Okay? And I'm kind of going to do the same thing that I just did before in creating my ledger here, the date, Merge and Center, left align. I want explanation, debit column, credit column, and the balance column. Okay. Again, I'd like these centered. Okay. So this was on August 12th, but I'm going to use April. We bought equipment for $5,000. Now we need, after posting this transaction to the ledger, we have to balance this account. Well, the balance in equipment has to be $5,000. So I'm going to go ahead and link cell reference F18. In F18, I'm going to reference D18. There we go. Okay, so the other part of this was cash, right? I paid $2,300 in cash. So very easy, right? On 4/12, or if you're looking at your exercise 2-9, it's actually August. But I credited cash for $2,300. So I'm going to credit cash to $2,300. I'm going to post that in the ledger, okay? But now, after this posting, I got to show what is the cash balance after that, the posting of that transaction. Well, I'm going to take my previous balance and I'm going to add or subtract the increase or decrease in cash, okay? So cash is decreasing. We know it's decreasing because we credited cash. So in order to get the correct balance, I'm going to take my previous balance. So I'm in F5. That's the cell reference I'm in. I typed equals, and I'm going to go to my previous balance, which was $7,600. That is in cell reference F4. Okay, and then I'm going to subtract my credit, which is $2,300. So in cell reference F5, I have F4, which is a cell right above it. Whatever data is there, I want to subtract it, or whatever it's pump the brakes. What Excel is doing is it takes we have to pick a cell, okay? In this case, we're in F5, right? And basically what we're telling Excel to do from cell reference F5, we're saying go up one cell from where you're at. Take that data that's in there. I don't care what the number is. Just go to that cell. Whatever data is in that cell, I want you to subtract the data that's in the cell directly to the left of F5. So basically, we're telling Excel, hey, we're in F5. Whatever's above it, whatever's above that cell reference, take that data and then subtract whatever data is in the cell to the left of F5. We get $5,300. That's my cash balance. Now, I'm not done yet with this transaction, right? Because we signed a notes payable. So I got to create a notes payable ledger. Again, just highlighting the cells that I want to merge and center. I'm typing in notes payable. I want to get a bottom border for this entire line or this entire cell that I created. So I come right here and just click the bottom border. Type in my date. Explanation, debit column, credit column, balance column. Again, I'm a little nerdy. I want these to be centered and look nice. So on 4/12, we increase the liability. We have to do that with a credit, right? So I have to credit, or I have to post a credit entry to notes payable, okay? It's $2,700. Now it's $2,700. Again, within the ledger, I have to say, okay, after this transaction, what's my balance? Well, it's $2,700. Nothing really changed, okay? Let's see. Then it looks like the next thing we have is August 25th. Yeah, August 25th. And it looks like on August 25th, we did some service for somebody, but they didn't pay us. They said, hey, we'll pay you later. Okay, no problem, right? So I need to first recognize that my revenue account's going up, and I also need to recognize that, I have a receivable here, okay? So we have our service, we have our revenue account. I can just post that, right? So this was on 4/25. Service revenue, or revenue, whatever we want to call it, always increases with a credit. I credited, I need to credit revenue for $1,700 because that is the amount of service that we performed for this person, for this client. So after I post that, again, I got to balance this ledger, right? I got to determine what is the balance of the ledger. So right now I'm in cell reference F15, and by saying equals, click cell reference F14 minus, and then click cell reference E14. I'm basically telling Excel, hey, in F15, I'm going to hit equals, and that means I want you to do a calculation, okay? We specify where we want it to go. I want it to go to cell reference F14, which is one above it, okay? So go a cell above it, take that data, and then do some mathematical function. Minus. Well, I got to enter some other data. So in that case, I'm going to go over and say E15. So basically, again, just to reiterate, in the balance column, in cell reference F15, we're telling Excel, go one cell above us, take that data, and then subtract whatever data is in the cell to the left of F15, and we get 900 bucks. Nope, that's wrong. I need to add, right? So let's do it all over again. F14 plus E15, 4,300 bucks. Now we're right, okay? So the other part of this says that I didn't get paid. I received a promise to get paid, so that's a receivable, right? So I'm just going to come down here, and I'm going to create my receivable column, or my receivable ledger, excuse me. Accounts receivable. I want this to be centered. Put in my bottom border. And then I'm going to go ahead and say the date, explanation, my debit column, my credit column, and my balance column, right? So remember, accounts receivable is an asset. My assets are increasing. So on, what date is this? 4/25. I have a debit of $1,700. And the balance after that for my accounts receivable is $1,700. Now the last transaction happens on August 31st, or in our case, April 1st, right? So I'm going to say 4/31. That client that we did service for back on August 25th, we provided them with revenue, or I'm sorry, we provided them with a service. We earned revenue. They said, we'll pay you later. We said, okay. That means we have a receivable. That means we have a promise from somebody to receive payment. Great. Well, August 31st rolls around. Guess what? They paid us $900. Okay, great. So my cash has to go up by $900, and my revenue, or I'm sorry, my receivable has to go down by $900, right? By the amount of the transaction. So what do? Well, I'm going to post the cash first. I'm going to post $900 to cash. I'm going to create the balance for cash. Well, I'm going to take my previous balance before the transaction, which was $5,300. I'm going to add my debit of $900. I get $6,200. I need to go down to my accounts receivable and show that on post this transaction of this person paying us $900. Okay, so since I'm crediting an asset, that means I'm decreasing the balance of that asset account. So I'm going to take $1,700 minus my $900. I get $800. So I now have the ending balances for each account. I'm just going to highlight them here. Okay, these are my ending balances. I can now create my trial balance. Okay, remember, when we do our trial balance, it's always assets are listed first, liabilities second, and then third is going to be my owner's capital, fourth is going to be my revenue, and then last are going to be my expenses. Now in this example, we have no expenses. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up in proper form, right? So I'm going to merge and center the first 5 columns here between H and L. I'm going to merge and center. Check this out. I'm going to get my little crosshairs right there, and I'm going to drag it down 1, 2. So the first 3 columns are now, or the first 3 rows are now merged and centered. So I can say trial balance, or I'm sorry, I can say the company's name, which is June Feldman, investment broker. Here's that we are doing the trial balance. And this is as of, remember the problem's August. Don't ask me why I typed in April. August 31st, 2017. Okay? So now I can go ahead and list my assets, right? Now, remember, we know cash is always going to be, 101, 100. The next asset we have is going to be our accounts receivable, right? Whenever we list assets, liabilities, whatever, we always list them in the order of liquidity, right? Whichever one is going to turn to cash first, right? So let's just focus on those assets, okay? Cash is cash, right? The next liquid asset we have that's an asset is going to be our accounts receivable. And it has to be a 100 account. We'll just call it 120, okay? That's fine. The next thing we have is going to be our equipment, right? Equipment's usually always one of the last assets that we list. And we'll say this asset's 180, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and create my trial balance. I'm going to do the assets first, okay? So, again, I want this to kind of look neat, so I'm going to go ahead and merge and center these H, I, and J columns within row 4. I'm going to say merge and center, left align, and I want to format all these cells below here the same way. So I'm just going to get my little crosshairs, click, and drag. And I just pulled it down an arbitrary amount, okay? So cash, well, actually, remember we need a debit column and a credit column. I'm going to center this. Okay, so now I'm going to say cash, that's my first asset. Well, cash has a balance of $6,200, okay? Well, how do I know that I need to make that a debit? Well, because I know assets increase with the debit, decrease with the credit. Debit is the normal balance side for an asset. So I don't even need to type in the number. I can link it to this balance. And there we go. The next asset we have is accounts receivable. What's my accounts receivable balance? Well, my accounts receivable balance, I just go to the ledger, find my accounts receivable. Oh, it's $800. That's my ending balance. Okay. So on the trial balance, I need to make sure I have a debit of $800. I just link them up. That's all I do. And there we go. Okay. The next asset I have is going to be my equipment. And I need to figure out what is my equipment balance. Well, I go to my ledger. I see my equipment balance is $500. Okay. Do I put it in the debit column or the credit column? Well, I need to know that assets increase with the debit, decrease with the credit. Debit is a normal balance side for an asset, so I have to have a debit. The amount has to go in the debit column of the trial balance. And there we go. Now, the next thing we have is our liabilities. So if I just kind of scroll through my list here, I see that the only liability that I have is my notes payable, right? Liabilities are usually in the form of, we said 200s, right? So I'll make it 220, okay? You might be wondering, because I'm not using my book, so not sure if they're giving me account numbers. I'm just arbitrarily making my own. If the problem did give us account numbers, we would use those, okay? Notes payable. So, what's my balance of notes payable? Well, to figure that out, I got to go to ledger, and I see, oh, it's $2,700. Okay, do I put it in the debit column or the credit column? Well, I know I put it in the credit column, right? Remember, this ledger is not going to tell me, right? It just says, hey, I debit, I credit, I increase, I decrease, okay? I need to know that liabilities increase with the credit, decrease with the debit, credit's the normal balance side. So in the credit column, I'm going to link up notes payable, $2,700, okay? The next thing I need to look at is my owner's capital account, right? We said those are usually 300s, right? So the only owner's capital or the only account I have that's owner's capital is the $5,000 account that we hit first. Okay? So again, I need to know what's the balance. Well, just go to ledger, see what the last balance is. Okay. Then I got to think. Owner's equity, how does it increase? Well, it increases with the credit. Well, if it increases with the credit must be the normal balance side. So I'm going to go ahead and put that amount in my credit column on my trial balance. Next thing, or the last thing we have, excuse me, is our revenues, right? So what's my revenue balance? I got to go to the ledger and find out. Oh, $4,300. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to say equals. And I'm going to go to my ledger and find my balance for revenues. There we go. Okay. So now I need to foot these columns. That means I got to total these columns up, right? In order to show that I'm going to do a mathematical function, I want to underline right underneath revenues, okay? So I'm going to click in cell reference K11. I picked that because that's at the bottom of the trial balance, right? We see that L11, there's numbers above it. K11, there's numbers above it. So I want to add all these numbers. I just click on my auto sum and notice what it says, equals sum. So basically what we're telling a cell is we're going to say, hey, we want you to sum all the cells between K5 and K10. We get $12,000. We do the same thing for the credit column. Auto sum, $12,000. Remember, we need to foot this column to show that we are done. So I'm going to double click both of these. I'm going to come to my border button right here, not the underline button. Don't go there. Come to this, the one with the box in it. And I want to find a double border, right? A double bottom border or bottom double border, okay? But check this out. There's also the button that says top and double bottom border. So if I didn't put my equals lines underneath the revenue, where the revenue section was, I could just click this, and I'll click it now. So look what it does. It reposted that top line above cell reference K11 and L11, and it gave me my double bottom border at the underneath K11 and L11. Okay, so that's how you post, how you go from the ledger to the trial balance using Excel. Okay, if you have any questions, want to see anything else, please don't hesitate to let me know. Be happy to help you out. Thanks, and have a great weekend.